The great hall of Kepler Prime buzzed with nervous energy. Representatives from dozens of alien species sat in floating chairs arranged in perfect circles. The air smelled of different atmospheres mixing together through translation fields. Some aliens breathed methane. Others needed high radiation levels, but they all came together for this emergency meeting. Zethkar stood at the center podium, his 6 legs clicking against the metal floor. His insect-like body was covered in dark green, armor that had grown from his own skin over hundreds of years. The Vorthak were old, older than most species in the galaxy, and they had seen things that made younger races nervous. Fellow representatives, Zethkar began, his voice translated into dozens of languages at once. I stand before you today with a warning that may save millions of lives. The hall grew quiet. Even the Hegemony Empire's representatives stopped their usual whispering and paid attention. Admiral Corvin, a tall, gray-skinned alien with 4 arms and cold black eyes, leaned forward in his chair. The Hegemony had been expanding fast, taking over star systems one by one. They were always looking for new worlds to claim. We have discovered a new species, Zethkar continued. They call themselves humans. They live on a small blue planet they call Earth, in what they name the Sol system. A holographic display appeared above the podium. It showed Earth spinning slowly with its white clouds and blue oceans. Cities glowed like tiny dots on the night side. Space stations orbited around it like metal insects. They look harmless enough, Admiral Corvin said with a laugh. Several other Hegemony officers joined in. Just another primitive species playing with rockets. That is exactly what makes them so dangerous, Zethkar said, his compound eyes focusing on the Admiral. We thought the same thing when we first met them. The hologram changed to show recordings from first contact. A small human ship had approached a Vorthak trading vessel near the edge of their space. The ship was crude, using chemical rockets and primitive computers. But something about the encounter had made the Vorthak trading captain nervous. Watch their behavior, Zethkar said. The recording played. The human ship's captain, a female with short brown hair, appeared on screen. She spoke calmly even though she was clearly outmatched by the alien vessel. When the Vorthak captain tried to claim salvage rights on human equipment, the human captain simply said no. Not with fear or anger, just a flat refusal. That should have been the end of it, Zethkar explained. Our captain had superior firepower. Standard protocol would be for the primitive species to submit or flee. But the human ship didn't do either. Instead, it stayed right where it was. The human captain kept talking, asking questions about Vorthak technology and culture. She acted like she was meeting an interesting neighbor, not a superior military force. Notice how she shows no fear, Zethkar said. This is not normal behavior. Most species, when meeting superior technology, react with either submission or terror. Humans react with curiosity. Admiral Corvin waved one of his 4 hands dismissively. Curiosity is not dangerous. It just means they're too stupid to know when they're beaten. That is what we thought too, Zethkar replied. Until we studied them further. The hologram changed again. Now it showed human cities, but not the peaceful ones from before. These were scenes of human warfare throughout their history. Soldiers, fighting in trenches, ships battling on stormy seas, aircraft dueling in the sky. They have been fighting each other for their entire recorded history, Zethkar said, not just for resources or territory, but for ideas, abstract concepts that cannot be touched or measured. They will die for these ideas. The images showed human soldiers charging into impossible odds, knowing they would die. They showed humans refusing to surrender even when completely surrounded. They showed humans fighting with broken weapons and empty stomachs simply because they believed in something. This is concerning, but not unique, said Representative Nala, a blue-skinned alien from the peaceful Thessian Republic. Many species go through warlike phases before they mature. True, Zethkar agreed, but humans are different. They don't just fight for survival. They fight harder when they're losing. Watch this. The hologram showed a human city under siege. The defenders were outnumbered 10 to 1. Their walls were crumbling, Their food was running out and their situation was hopeless. But instead of surrendering, the humans fought more fiercely than before. They used broken furniture as weapons. They dug tunnels under enemy lines. They refused to give up even when giving up was the only logical choice. We have studied hundreds of species, Zethkar said. When most creatures are cornered, they either submit or panic. Humans become more dangerous. Admiral Corvin stood up, his black uniform shining under the lights. Representative Zethkar, I appreciate your concern, but the Hegemony Empire has conquered 47 star systems. We know how to handle primitive species. These humans have not even achieved faster than light travel. They are confined to one small system. That is exactly why they must be left alone, Zethkar said urgently. They are not ready for galactic contact, not because they are too weak, but because they are too strong. The Vorthak representative activated another hologram. This one showed human space around Earth. There were hundreds of small ships moving between planets, mining operations on asteroids, research stations studying the sun. For a species without FTL travel, they were remarkably active in their own system. Look at their space activity, Zethkar said. They have been spacefaring for less than 100 of their years, yet they have completely colonized their system. They build constantly. They explore constantly. They are not content to stay in one place. All the more reason to incorporate them into the Empire, Admiral Corvin said. Their energy could be useful if properly directed. Several other representatives nodded. The Galactic Senate had rules about first contact, but the Hegemony Empire was powerful enough to ignore rules when it suited them. Zethkar's compound eyes darkened. You do not understand. We tried to establish a trading relationship with one human colony ship. It was a small vessel, maybe 200 humans aboard. They were traveling to another star using a generation ship that would take centuries to reach its destination. What happened? Asked Representative Nala. We offered them our assistance. Faster ships, better technology, a place in the galactic community. All we asked for in return was the standard trading agreement. Some of their genetic material for our databases, access to their cultural knowledge, the usual things. A generous offer, Admiral Corvin said. They refused, Zethkar said quietly. Not with anger or fear. They simply said no. They said they preferred to make their own way, even if it took 1,000 years. When we pressed the issue, they armed their ship, a primitive vessel with nuclear weapons and chemical rockets facing our advanced cruiser. The hall was silent now. Everyone was listening. They made it clear they would rather die than accept our help, Zethkar continued. This is not normal thinking. Most species want to survive above all else. Humans want to survive on their own terms. Admiral Corvin laughed, but it sounded forced. One ship full of fanatics does not represent an entire species. That is what we thought, Zethkar said. Until we intercepted their communications. Every human colony ship we have encountered responds the same way. They do not want our help. They do not want our protection. They want to be left alone to do things their way. The Vorthak representative looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of as many delegates as possible. I have lived for 800 years, he said. I have seen species rise and fall. I have watched civilizations burn and others reach for the stars. In all that time, I have learned one thing: some doors should not be opened. Some species should not be awakened. But Admiral Corvin was already gathering his papers. Thank you for your concerns, Representative Zethkar. The Hegemony will take them under advisement. The vote was called. Despite Zethkar's warnings, despite the evidence, the Hegemony Empire was granted permission to make contact with humanity. The decision was not unanimous, but it didn't need to be. The Empire had enough allies in the Senate to get what they wanted. As the delegates filed out, Zethkar remained at the podium. He watched Admiral Corvin leave with his officers, already planning their expedition to the Sol system. The Vorthak representative felt a deep sadness in his ancient bones. He had tried to warn them. He had shown them the evidence. But some species only learned from their own mistakes. Zethkar just hoped the galaxy would survive the lesson. 6 months after the Senate meeting, Admiral Corvin stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds. Through the massive viewing windows, he could see the rest of the Third Fleet spread out in formation. 200 ships of various sizes floated in the darkness of space, their hulls gleaming with energy shields and weapon ports. The human system lay ahead of them, looking exactly as peaceful as the intelligence reports had suggested. The yellow star burned brightly in the center, with several planets orbiting around it. The third planet, Earth, glowed blue and white in the distance. Space around it was busy with tiny metal dots, human ships and stations. "Admiral," reported Lieutenant Vex from the communications station. "We are receiving multiple signals from the human homeworld. They appear to be trying to contact us." "Already?" Corvin said with surprise. "They detected us faster than expected." The hegemony had emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, thinking they would have time to position their forces before the primitive humans even knew they were there. But somehow, the humans had spotted them almost immediately. "Put their transmission on screen," Corvin ordered. The main display flickered and a human face appeared. It was a middle-aged male with gray hair and tired eyes. He wore a simple blue uniform with no visible weapons. Behind him, Corvin could see what looked like a command center with dozens of humans working at computer stations. "Greetings," the human said in accented galactic standard. "I am Secretary General Chen of the United Earth Government. We welcome you to our system and hope your intentions are peaceful." Corvin was impressed despite himself. The humans had learned galactic standard, somehow probably from intercepted transmissions. They were more advanced than the initial report suggested. "Secretary General Chen," Corvin replied, activating the translation matrix. "I am Admiral Corvin of the Hegemony Empire. We come with an offer of membership in our great civilization." "We appreciate the offer," Chen said carefully, "but we must respectfully decline." The bridge fell silent. In 47 previous conquests, no species had simply said no to the initial offer. They usually asked for time to consider, or demanded to know more details, or tried to negotiate. None had ever just refused outright. "Perhaps you do not understand," Corvin said, his voice growing cold. "This is not a request. Your system has been claimed by the Hegemony Empire. You will submit to our authority, and in return, we will provide protection and technology." Secretary General Chen was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was calm but firm. "Admiral Corvin, we have discussed your offer with our Global Council. While we recognize your superior technology and numbers, we cannot accept your terms. Earth will remain independent." "That is not an option," Corvin said. He gestured to his tactical officer, who activated a display showing the full fleet. "We have 200 warships and 50,000 soldiers. Your entire species is confined to one small system. You cannot possibly resist." "We understand the odds," Chen replied. "But understanding them and accepting them are different things." The transmission ended. Admiral Corvin stared at the blank screen for a long moment, then turned to his officers. "Battle stations," he ordered. "Prepare for planetary bombardment. These humans need to learn what happens when they refuse the Empire's generosity." But the humans were not simply waiting to be bombarded. As the hegemony fleet moved toward Earth, alarms began sounding throughout the ships. "Admiral," shouted the sensor operator. "Multiple contacts coming from the asteroid belt. Fast-moving objects on intercept course." The main screen switched to tactical display. Dozens of small objects were racing toward the fleet at incredible speed. They were too small to be ships, but too fast to be natural asteroids. "Kinetic projectiles," Corvin realized. "They're firing rocks at us." The first wave of projectiles slammed into the fleet's outer ships. The hegemony shields held against most of them, but a few punched through and caused minor damage. More concerning was the fact that the humans had somehow calculated the exact position and timing needed to hit moving targets across millions of kilometers of space. "Return fire," Corvin ordered. "Target their launch platforms." But when the hegemony weapons fired at the asteroid belt, they found nothing. The launch platforms were mobile, hidden among thousands of real asteroids. The humans had turned their entire asteroid belt into a weapon. "Sir," reported the communications officer. "We're receiving a transmission from Earth." "Put it through." This time it was a different human, a woman in military uniform. "Admiral Corvin, this is General Martinez of Earth Defense Command. You have entered our system with hostile intent. We are prepared to defend ourselves." "General," Corvin said with forced patience, "you cannot win this fight. Your weapons are primitive. Your ships are slow. Surrender now and we will be merciful." "Admiral," General Martinez replied, "you're probably right that we can't win. But we're going to try anyway." Another wave of kinetic projectiles hit the fleet, these ones larger and faster than before. Several hegemony ships suffered shield failures and hull breaches. Corvin watched in disbelief as the humans continued their impossible attack. "How are they targeting us so accurately?" demanded the tactical officer. "Unknown, sir. Our ships are supposed to be invisible to their primitive sensors. But the humans were using more than sensors. Hidden throughout their system were millions of small observation satellites, each one barely larger than a human fist. They networked together to create a detection grid that could track every ship in the fleet. The battle continued for hours. The hegemony fleet moved toward Earth, taking constant fire from hidden human positions. The humans used every dirty trick they could think of. They hid weapons inside fake asteroid mining equipment. They launched surprise attacks from behind, gas giant moons. They even sent unmanned ships packed with nuclear explosives on suicide runs against hegemony vessels. "This is insane," muttered Lieutenant Vex. "Why don't they just surrender? They must know they're only delaying the inevitable." Admiral Corvin was beginning to wonder the same thing. The humans were fighting like they actually believed they could win, despite being completely outmatched. Their tactics were clever but desperate. They were clearly giving everything they had. As the fleet finally reached Earth's orbit, Corvin saw something that made his blood run cold. The planet's surface was covered with defensive installations. Every major city had missile batteries and energy weapon platforms. The humans had spent months turning their homeworld into a fortress. "General Martinez," Corvin called on the open channel. "Look around you. Your defenses cannot stop our full fleet. Your people will die for nothing. Is your independence really worth genocide?" The human general appeared on screen again. Behind her, Corvin could see technicians working frantically at their stations. Explosions in orbit lit up the sky through the windows. "Admiral," she said, "you don't understand humans very well. We've been fighting impossible odds our whole history. We fought ice ages with stone tools. We fought diseases with herbs and prayer. We fought tyranny with muskets against cannons." She paused, watching another explosion outside her window. "We don't fight because we think we can win," she continued. "We fight because it's who we are. And sometimes if we fight hard enough and get lucky enough, the impossible becomes possible." As if summoned by her words, alarms began blaring throughout. The hegemony flagship. The tactical display showed something that should have been impossible. Human ships were emerging from behind Earth's moon. Not the primitive chemical rockets they had expected, but sleek vessels with energy signatures that almost matched hegemony technology. "How?" breathed Admiral Corvin. The answer came from his intelligence officer who had been analyzing captured human communications. "Sir, they've been reverse engineering our technology. They captured several probe ships we sent ahead and studied them. They built these ships in the past 6 months." The human fleet was small, maybe 30 ships compared to the hegemony's 200. But they were fighting in their home system, with support from planetary defenses and asteroid-based weapons. More importantly, they were fighting with a desperation and creativity that the hegemony had never encountered. As the battle raged around Earth, Admiral Corvin began to understand what the Vorthak representative had tried to warn them about. These humans didn't fight like a civilized species. They fought like cornered animals, except animals didn't build faster-than-light ships in 6 months or coordinate system-wide defenses. The humans were using their entire civilization as a weapon. Their scientists worked around the clock to improve their technology. Their engineers built new weapons faster than the hegemony could destroy them. Their soldiers fought with a fury that scared even hardened hegemony veterans. "Sir," reported the communications officer, "Admiral Thex is requesting reinforcements. His division is taking heavy casualties." Corvin looked at the tactical display. What should have been a simple conquest was turning into a grinding siege. The humans weren't just defending their planet. They were learning to fight more effectively, with every passing hour. "Send a message to High Command," he ordered. "Request additional fleet support. This is taking longer than expected." As he gave the order, Admiral Corvin felt a cold dread in his stomach. The Vorthak had been right. 1 year and 4 months after the siege of Sol began, Admiral Corvin stood in his private quarters staring at reports that made no sense. The Hegemony Empire had committed 3 full fleets to the Sol system, nearly 600 ships and 150,000 soldiers. Yet somehow the humans were still fighting. Worse than that, they were getting better at it. The door chimed and Lieutenant Vex entered carrying a data tablet. The young officer looked tired. They all looked tired these days. "The daily casualty. Report, sir," Vex said, setting the tablet on Corvin's desk. The Admiral picked it up and read through the numbers. 17 more ships damaged beyond repair. 3 destroyed completely. Nearly 1,000 soldiers killed or wounded. The humans had lost more, but they seemed to have an endless supply of volunteers ready to replace the fallen. "How are they doing it?" Corvin muttered. "They should have run out of resources months ago." The answer lay in something the Hegemony had never encountered before: total warfare. The humans hadn't just mobilized their military. They had mobilized their entire civilization. Every factory that once made consumer goods now produced weapons. Every scientist who once studied peaceful subjects now worked on military technology. Every citizen who could hold a tool was helping the war effort in some way. "Sir," Vex said hesitantly, "there's something else. Intelligence has intercepted more human communications." "What kind of communications?" "Military chatter, sir. But it's unusual." Corvin activated his personal display and read through the transcripts. What he saw made him deeply uncomfortable. The human soldiers weren't talking like desperate defenders fighting for survival. They were talking like athletes discussing a challenging game. "Did you see that shot Martinez made on the Hegemony cruiser yesterday?" one transmission read. "Right through their shield generator. Beautiful work. Thompson's squad is up to 15. Ship kills this week," said another. "My unit is only at 12. We need to step up our game." The big game. That's what they called it. The humans had given their desperate war against a superior enemy a nickname that sounded like a sporting event. "This cannot be accurate," Corvin said. "These transmissions must be propaganda meant to confuse us." "We thought so too, sir," Vex replied. "But our psychological analysis team confirms they're genuine. The humans appear to be enjoying themselves." Knock at the door interrupted them. "Enter," Corvin called. Dr. Malthus, the fleet's chief psychologist, stepped inside. The elderly alien's face was grim. "Admiral, I've completed my analysis of the captured human prisoner. You need to hear this." Corvin gestured for him to continue. "The subject is Dr. Elena Vasquez, a xenobiologist from one of their research stations. She was captured 3 weeks ago when her station was overrun. By all accounts, she should be terrified, demoralized, and ready to provide information in exchange for protection. But she's not," Corvin guessed. "Quite the opposite, sir. She's curious about us. She keeps asking questions about hegemony biology and technology. When I explained the futility of human resistance, she laughed." "She laughed?" "Yes, sir. Then she told me something that has kept me awake for the past week. She said, and I quote, 'Doctor, you don't understand humans very well. We've spent our entire evolutionary history fighting things that were bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than us. It's what we do. It's what we're good at.'" Dr. Malthus activated his own data display, showing images of Earth's history. "I decided to research her claims, Admiral. What I found is deeply disturbing. Humans evolved on a death world. Their planet regularly experiences mass extinction events. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions. Most species that face such challenges go extinct. Humans adapted. The display showed early humans hunting massive predators with primitive weapons. They didn't just survive, Admiral, they dominated. Within a few thousand years, they had hunted most of the large predators on their planet to extinction. Not for survival, For sport. Corvin felt a chill run down his spine. It gets worse, Dr. Malthus continued. When they ran out of external threats, they started fighting each other. But not just for resources or territory. They fight for ideas, for beliefs, for abstract concepts. They've developed war into an art form. The display showed human conflicts throughout history, battles where humans fought against impossible odds, not because they had to, but because they believed in something worth dying for. Look at this battle, Dr. Malthus said, highlighting a historical engagement. 300 humans against an army of thousands. They knew they would die. They fought anyway, and their sacrifice inspired others to continue fighting. This pattern repeats throughout their history. What are you saying, Doctor? I'm saying that war isn't something that happens to humans, Admiral. War is something humans do, and they've had thousands of years to practice. As if summoned by their conversation, another alarm began sounding throughout the ship. Corvin's communicator crackled to life. Admiral, to the bridge immediately, we have a situation. Corvin ran to the bridge, followed by his officers. What he saw on the tactical display made his heart skip a beat. A human ship was approaching their position, but not like any human ship they had seen before. Sir, reported the sensor operator. It's broadcasting surrender codes, but something's wrong with it. The ship was clearly damaged, listing to one side with several hull breaches visible, but its power signature was all wrong. It was reading, as a hegemony vessel, not a human one. It's a trap, Corvin said immediately. All weapons target that ship. Wait, called out the communications officer. We're receiving a transmission. It's from our own people. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of what was clearly a hegemony vessel, but it was occupied by humans. They wore captured hegemony uniforms and operated the alien controls with obvious familiarity. A human woman, probably in her 30s with short black hair, looked directly at Admiral Corvin through the screen. Admiral Corvin, she said in perfect galactic standard. I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. I wanted to thank you for the ship. That's impossible, Corvin breathed. Our security systems are really quite good, Captain Chen agreed. It took us 3 months to figure out how to bypass them. Your people fought bravely, by the way. We gave them full military honors. The bridge crew was dead. The humans had somehow captured an entire hegemony cruiser, killed or captured the YA crew and figured out how to operate it in 3 months. How? Was all Corvin could manage to say. Captain Chen smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Admiral, humans have been stealing enemy equipment and turning it against them for our entire history. We captured Roman weapons and learned to make better ones. We studied German rockets and reached the moon. We reverse-engineered alien technology and built starships. She gestured around the bridge. This is what we do. We adapt. We learn. We overcome. The transmission ended and the captured ship vanished back into the asteroid field before the hegemony weapons could lock onto it. Sir, reported the tactical officer, we're detecting similar power signatures from 17 other locations. They've captured more of our ships. Admiral Corvin sat down heavily in his command chair. The humans weren't just defending themselves anymore. They were actively hunting hegemony vessels, capturing them, and adding them to their own fleet. They were learning to use alien technology faster than any species on record. Get me a secure line to High Command, he ordered. Priority 1 encryption. When the connection was established, Admiral Corvin found himself face-to-face with Supreme Admiral Vorth, the highest-ranking officer in the hegemony military. Admiral Corvin, Vorth said coldly, your reports indicate the Sol campaign is taking longer than expected. Sir, I need to request additional resources. These humans are not behaving like a normal species under siege. Explain. Corvin took a deep breath. They're adapting to our technology faster than our analyst believed possible. They've captured several of our ships and are using them against us. Their morale is actually improving as the siege continues. And, sir, they appear to be enjoying the war. Supreme Admiral Vorth was quiet for a long moment. Admiral, are you telling me that a primitive species confined to one star system is defeating 3 of our fleets? Not defeating, sir. But they're not losing either. And every day they fight, they get stronger. How long do you estimate until their final defeat? Admiral Corvin looked around his bridge at the tired faces of his crew. He thought about the captured ships, the impossible human tactics, and Dr. Vasquez's laughter. "Sir," he said quietly, "I'm not sure they can be defeated. Not conventionally." Emisao, transmission ended abruptly. Admiral Corvin knew his career was probably over, but he didn't care anymore. He was too busy wondering what the humans would think of next. Outside his ship, the war continued. Human vessels darted between asteroids, like metallic fish, striking at hegemony ships and vanishing before retaliation could come. Their communications channels buzzed with tactical updates and what sounded disturbingly like excitement. The humans were learning to wage war against the galaxy's most powerful empire, and they were having fun doing it. Admiral Corvin closed his eyes and tried not to think about what would happen when they finally learned enough to take the fight beyond their own system. The attack on New Geneva changed everything. Admiral Corvin watched the tactical display with growing unease as his bombardment fleet moved toward the human colony world. New Geneva was a small planet, barely 2 million inhabitants, located in the outer reaches of the Sol system. It was primarily a research colony, with several universities and civilian laboratories. The decision to target civilians had come from high command. After 2 years of grinding warfare, the hegemony leadership had grown frustrated with the slow progress. The humans refused to break, refused to surrender, and somehow kept getting stronger. Supreme Admiral Vorth had ordered a demonstration, show the humans what happened to species that defied the Empire. "Admiral," reported the weapons officer, "we are in range of the primary population centers." Corvin hesitated. In his 40 years of service, he had conquered dozens of worlds, but he had never deliberately targeted civilians. The hegemony preferred to rule willing subjects, not smoking ruins. "Sir," the weapons officer asked again. "Commence bombardment," Corvin said quietly. "Target the major cities." The orbital bombardment lasted for 6 hours. When it was over, New Geneva was a graveyard. The universities were ash. The research centers were craters. 50,000 humans were dead, and another 50,000 were dying from radiation poisoning. "Send a message to Earth," Corvin ordered. "Tell them this is what happens when they resist the Empire." The response came faster than expected. Instead of the usual government officials, the transmission showed General Martinez on what appeared to be a military command vessel. "Admiral Corvin," she said, and her voice was different than before, colder, harder. "We received your message. General, I hope you understand." "We understand perfectly," Martinez interrupted. "You murdered 50,000 civilians to try to break our morale." Corvin nodded. "The Empire does not wish to continue this violence. Surrender now, and no more colonies will be targeted." General Martinez stared at him through the screen for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Admiral, you have made a terrible mistake." The transmission ended. For a moment, the bridge was quiet. Then the alarms started sounding. "Admiral," shouted the sensor operator. Multiple contacts throughout the system. Human ships are moving. The tactical display lit up like a star chart. Everywhere the hegemony had forces. Human ships were emerging from hiding. They came from asteroid bases, from behind moons, from the dark spaces between planets. Hundreds of ships, moving with coordinated precision toward hegemony positions. "How many?" Corvin demanded. "Unknown, sir. We're reading at least 300 contacts, but there could be more. They're using some kind of stealth technology we haven't seen before." But it wasn't just the number of ships that made Corvin's blood run cold. It was how they were moving. The humans had always fought defensively, striking and retreating, using their home system's geography to their advantage. Now they were attacking everything at once. "Sir," reported the communications officer, "we're receiving distress calls from Admiral Thex's fleet near Jupiter. They're under heavy attack." And Admiral Voss's group near Mars, added another officer. "They're requesting immediate support." And the mining operation near the asteroid belt. "They're being overrun." Admiral Corvin realized with growing horror that the humans had somehow coordinated simultaneous attacks across the entire star system. They were hitting every hegemony position at the same time, with a level of organization that should have been impossible for a species that had been fighting for survival just hours ago. "Get me Admiral Thex," Corvin ordered. The screen showed the bridge of Thex's flagship, but it was a scene of chaos. Smoke filled the air, and sparks flew from damaged consoles. Admiral Thex himself was bleeding from a head wound. "Corvin." Thex shouted over the sound of explosions. "They've gone insane. They're not taking prisoners anymore. They're ramming our ships with suicide vessels." "Fall back to defensive positions," Corvin ordered. "With what?" Thex replied bitterly. "They're not fighting like they're trying to survive anymore. They're fighting like they're trying to kill every last one of us." The transmission cut off as another explosion rocked Thex's ship. "Sir," the tactical officer said urgently, "the humans have broken through Admiral Voss's formation. They're heading for the supply depot at Ceres." Corvin watched in disbelief as the tactical display showed human ships moving with purpose and coordination. They weren't just defending their home system anymore. They were actively hunting down every hegemony asset they could find. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth. It's not from the government. It's from their military command." "Put it through." This time, it wasn't General Martinez on the screen. It was a younger, human, a man in military uniform with cold eyes and a grim expression. "Hegemony forces," he said without preamble. "This is Admiral Jackson of the Earth Defense Force. You have committed an act of genocide against our people. As of this moment, we are no longer fighting a defensive war." "What do you mean?" Corvin asked. "We mean," Admiral Jackson replied, "that we have stopped trying to make you leave. Now we're trying to make sure you never threaten any human colony again." The transmission ended and Admiral Corvin felt a chill run through his body. Something fundamental had changed in the way the humans were fighting. They weren't trying to survive anymore. They were trying to win. Over the next few days, the change became impossible to ignore. Human ships that had once struck and retreated now pressed their attacks until either they or their targets were destroyed. Human colonies that had once focused on defense began sending out armed vessels to hunt hegemony patrols. Most disturbing of all, humans stopped surrendering. "Sir," reported Dr. Malthus during the daily briefing, "we need to discuss the prisoner situation." "What prisoner situation?" "We don't have any, sir. In the past week, we haven't captured a single human. They fight to the death. Every single one of them." Admiral Corvin felt sick. "What about their casualties? Are they running out of personnel?" "That's the disturbing part, sir. According to our intelligence, human military enrollment has increased by 900% since the New Geneva incident. Their civilians are volunteering for military service faster than they can be trained." The door chimed, and Lieutenant Vex entered with another data tablet. "The latest reports from the other theaters, sir," Vex said, but his voice was shaking. Corvin read through the reports and felt his worst fears confirmed. The humans weren't just fighting harder. They were fighting smarter. They had somehow reverse-engineered hegemony faster than light technology and were building ships that could travel between star systems. "This is impossible," Corvin muttered. "FTL technology takes decades to develop even with captured examples." "Sir," Vex said quietly, "according to our intelligence, they've converted their entire industrial capacity to military production. Every factory, every research facility, every resource extraction operation, their entire civilization has become a war machine. And it's working," Dr. Malthus added grimly. "Our psychological profiles indicate that the New Geneva attack didn't break human morale. It unified them. Every human in their system now has a personal reason to hate the Empire." Admiral Corvin set down the reports and walked to the observation window. Outside, he could see the distant glow of Earth, still defiant after 2 years of siege. But it looked different now, brighter, more active. The humans had turned their homeworld into a fortress and a factory, all at the same time. "Sir?" the communications officer called out. "We're receiving priority transmission from High Command." Supreme Admiral Vorth appeared on the main screen, and he looked angry. Admiral Corvin, explain to me how a primitive species has managed to destroy 6 of our fleet bases in the past week. Sir, the humans have achieved faster-than-light capability. They're no longer confined to their home system. How is that possible? They reverse-engineered our technology, sir. But they didn't just copy it, they improved it. Their ships are faster and more maneuverable than ours. Supreme Admiral Vorth was quiet for a long moment. Admiral, are you telling me that these humans are now a threat to the Empire itself? Corvin looked around his bridge at the exhausted faces of his crew. He thought about Admiral Thex's desperate last transmission. He thought about the human ships hunting through the asteroid belt like predators stalking prey. Sir, he said carefully, I believe the humans were always a threat to the Empire. We just didn't realize it until we woke them up. Explain. The Vorthak tried to warn us, sir. They said some species should be left alone. Not because they're too weak to conquer, but because they're too dangerous to provoke. You're saying we created this problem? Yes, sir. We turned a peaceful species into a military threat by attacking them. And now they're not just defending themselves. They're coming for us. As if summoned by his words, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The tactical display showed something that made every officer on the bridge go pale. Human ships were emerging from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Not the captured hegemony vessels they had been using, but sleek new designs that looked like nothing either species had built before. Sir, reported the sensor operator, his voice barely above a whisper. 18 months after the Battle of Saul ended, Admiral Corvin sat in a detention cell aboard a human ship, writing his final report. His hands shook as he typed on the primitive computer terminal they had given him. Outside his small window, he could see 12 hegemony worlds burning. The human counterattack had been swift and devastating. Within 6 months of achieving faster-than-light travel, human fleets had appeared simultaneously over a dozen hegemony colonies. But they hadn't come as conquerors in the traditional sense. They had come as something far more terrifying. Liberators, with a grudge. Corvin's cell door opened and Captain Sarah Chen entered. She was the same human who had stolen a hegemony cruiser 3 years ago, but now she wore the uniform of what the humans called their Galactic Liberation Fleet. Her ship, ironically, was a captured hegemony dreadnought that the humans had improved beyond recognition. Admiral, Captain Chen said politely, I thought you might want to know that the surrender of Hegemony Station 7 is complete. All civilian personnel are being relocated to safety. Corvin looked up from his report. And the military personnel? Those who surrender are treated according to galactic law. Those who fight. Chen shrugged. Your people taught us not to take unnecessary prisoners. It was true. After New Geneva, the humans had stopped showing mercy to hegemony forces that continued fighting. But unlike the Empire's brutal methods, the humans were scrupulously fair to anyone who surrendered. They followed the old galactic conventions of war better than the hegemony ever had. Captain, Corvin said quietly, may I ask you something? Of course. Why are you doing this? You've already driven us from your system. You could have stopped there. Why are you conquering our territory? Captain Chen sat down across from him, her expression thoughtful. Admiral, do you remember what you told General Martinez when you demanded our surrender? You said we would be incorporated into your empire for our own protection. I remember. Well, we've decided to return the favor. We're liberating hegemony worlds for their own protection. Protection from the Empire that would bombard civilians to make a point. Corvin felt a bitter laugh escape his throat. You're conquering us to save us from ourselves? Something like that, Chen agreed. Though we prefer to think of it as aggressive peacekeeping. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. Admiral, there's something else you should know. The Galactic Senate is meeting next week to discuss the new political situation. Representatives from 43 species will be attending, including humans, especially humans. Secretary General Chen, my brother actually, will be presenting Earth's proposal for a new galactic government, one based on voluntary cooperation rather than imperial conquest. After she left, Corvin returned to his report. He wrote about the systematic collapse of hegemony resistance, about the frightening efficiency of human military operations, and about the strange mercy they showed to defeated enemies. The humans had turned warfare into a science. They studied each battle, learned from every mistake, and adapted their tactics faster than any military force in galactic history. More importantly, they had learned to coordinate the efforts of their entire species in ways that even advanced civilizations found difficult. But what truly frightened Corvin was how the humans fought when they weren't angry. During the Siege of Sol, they had been defending their homes, fighting with the desperation of cornered animals. Now, as they swept through hegemony space, they fought with cold professional efficiency. They weren't angry anymore. They were just very, very good at war. The door opened again, and this time it was Dr. Elena Vasquez, the xenobiologist who had been captured during the early days of the war. She now wore the uniform of a human intelligence officer. "Admiral Corvin," she said with a smile, "I wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" "For the education. 3 years of studying hegemony technology and tactics taught us more about galactic civilization than we could have learned in decades of peaceful contact." Corvin stared at her. "You're saying the war was educational?" "Oh yes. We learned about faster-than-light travel, energy weapons, galactic politics, alien psychology, and military strategy. But most importantly, we learned that the galaxy needed someone willing to stand up to bullies." She sat down where Captain Chen had been sitting. "Admiral, humans have a saying, when someone shows you who they really are, believe them. The hegemony showed us that they were willing to murder civilians to enforce their will, so we believed them, and we acted accordingly. By destroying the empire? By replacing it with something better," Dr. Vasquez corrected. "The hegemony conquered through fear. We're liberating through hope. Every species we've freed from hegemony, rule has been offered full membership in what we're calling the Galactic Cooperative. And if they refuse, then they refuse. Unlike the Empire, we actually mean it when we say membership is voluntary." She stood to leave, then turned back one more time. "Admiral, you might be interested to know that Representative Zethkar of the Vorthak will be speaking at the Senate meeting next week. I'm told he has some things to say about ignored warnings." After she left, Corvin finished his report and submitted it to the human authorities. Then he lay on his narrow bunk and stared at the ceiling, thinking about the chain of events that had led to this moment. It had started with simple arrogance. The hegemony had seen a primitive species and assumed they could be easily conquered. They had ignored the warnings of those who knew better. They had awakened something that should have been left sleeping. Now, 3 years later, the hegemony empire was finished. Not destroyed, but transformed. Human fleets patrolled former hegemony space, enforcing a peace based on cooperation rather than conquest. Former subject species were discovering what it meant to govern themselves, and somewhere in the galaxy, other aggressive empires were beginning to worry about this new human-led coalition. A week later, Corvin watched the Galactic Senate proceedings from his cell. The Great Hall on Kepler Prime was packed with representatives from across the galaxy. But the atmosphere was different now. Instead of the careful protocol that had once characterized Senate meetings, there was an energy of excitement and change. Representative Zethkar took the podium, his ancient form moving slowly but purposefully. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of centuries. "Fellow representatives," he began, 3 years ago I stood in this same hall and warned you about a species called humans. I told you they were dangerous. I told you they should be left alone." The hall was silent. The hegemony empire did not listen. They believed their technology and numbers made them invincible. They learned, as many species before them have learned, that technology is not the same as wisdom. Zethkar activated a holographic display showing the current galactic map. Former hegemony worlds glowed blue, indicating their new status as free systems under human protection. "The humans have done what we thought was impossible. They have defeated the most powerful empire in the galaxy. But more importantly, they have done something we thought was unprecedented. They have used their victory to make the galaxy a better place." The Vorthak representative paused, his compound eyes scanning the assembled delegates. I warned you that humans were too dangerous to provoke. I was wrong. Humans are not too dangerous. They are dangerous to the right things. They are dangerous to tyrants. They are dangerous to empires that rule through fear. They are dangerous to anyone who believes that might makes right. Secretary General Chen, representing Earth, stood to address the Senate. He was older now, gray-haired and tired from 3 years of war and diplomacy, but his voice was strong. Representatives, he said, we did not ask for this war. We did not want to become a galactic power. But when faced with extinction, we chose to fight. And when faced with victory, we chose to build, rather than rule. He gestured to the display showing the new Galactic Cooperative's territory. We offer every species the same choice we wanted for ourselves, the right to determine your own future. Join us if you wish. Remain independent if you prefer. But know that we will not tolerate the kind of imperial aggression that brought war to our system. The debate that followed lasted for hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The old Galactic Senate, which had rubber-stamped hegemony expansion for decades, voted to dissolve itself. In its place, they established the Galactic Cooperative Council, with Earth as its first capital world. Admiral Corvin watched it all from his cell, thinking about the warnings they had ignored and the price they had paid for their arrogance. The humans had proven that sometimes the most dangerous species were not the ones with the biggest guns or the most advanced technology. Sometimes the most dangerous species were the ones who refused to give up. As the proceedings ended, Corvin began writing a new report. This one was not for his superiors in the defunct hegemony military. This one was for future historians, a warning for any species that might someday face the same choice the hegemony had faced. Some species, he wrote, should be left alone. Not because they are weak, but because they are strong in ways you cannot imagine. The humans taught us that there are worse things than losing a war. There is losing a war to someone who then proves they were the better choice to lead all along. Outside his window, human ships continued their patrols,